Ever wonder why it seems like your opponent keeps knowing your position without you ever having given them information, or always stacking the site that your team was going towards even though you were completely silent? Well, the answer is not always wall hacks.
What's going on, ProGuides fam? I'm Kangas, and today I'm bringing you a new series called Improvement Saturdays, where every Saturday we break down an aspect of tactical FPS games so that you guys can better understand the game at a higher level. Today we're going to cover a more advanced FPS concept of mind games, and how defaults and information gathering factor into the bigger picture of how you control the pace of a match and net yourself the win. So let's hop right into it.
Oh, and if you find that you have trouble implementing these concepts or ideas into your gameplay, don't worry, we also got you covered. Our rating and Immortal level coaches on our website are more than happy to help you understand mind games or any other aspect of Valorant to a higher level. This is how I learned all these concepts myself, so I highly recommend it. Plus, we recently partnered with Scream from Team Liquid to release a course detailing the way of the Duelist, and how you can take the potential of the Duelist class to the absolute maximum, so make sure to check that out too if you're interested on ProGuides.com. So before we talk about mind games and how they factor into a shooter like Valorant, we first need to understand what the concept of a mind game actually is. Mind games are a series of actions or responses meant to have a psychological effect on another player with the intent of gaining a competitive advantage. When we talk about psychological effects, this could either be fear, respect, a false sense of confidence, pridefulness, confusion, or really any other emotion that could affect an enemy's gameplay. Most players play the game with a level of critical thinking, and this only becomes more relevant at higher ranks. Psychological effects directly impact critical thinking and can cause players to make unsafe decisions and push too far, or play too safe and therefore give your team free map control. Our goal is to first be able to read what the enemy is intending to do, and then find a way to counter their play or manipulate them to do what we want using mind games. If you are successfully able to control their actions or be aware of the psychological effects that drive their actions, then you now have a competitive advantage over the enemy in the form of information and clarity. For example, one easy psychological effect to notice is fear. If your team decides to rush A site on Haven but gets shut down in spectacular fashion, and I'm talking couldn't even get the bomb planted and their enemy Reyna just got a 4K from backside, then you're more likely than not going to challenge that site again. And if you do, you're going to be extra careful in entering the site, which may slow down the take and give enemies valuable time to rotate. This is the effect of fear, which is a naturally occurring psychological effect that every player has dealt with at some point, whether they were aware of it or not. On the other hand, the same thing can be said with the opposite result. Your team decides to rush a site. You guys absolutely destroy the defense, and your team secures an easy round with little casualties. Well, this can strike fear into the defenders, which could result in them deciding to play retake the next time that you enter their site, or even cause them to call for rotates much more quickly than before. Knowing this, even if you were entered the exact same way that you did last time, the enemy's responses are different and can affect the outcome of the round. This, at its core, is mind games. As a continuation of the latter example, let's just say that you decide to take advantage of their fear by faking a site instead. Because the defenders are on edge and fear your teams execute onto the site, they call for rotates as soon as your Sova shoots his dart into A and they hear a set of footsteps from your Jet who's selling the fake. Meanwhile, your team is moving towards the other side of the map and getting ready to entry into C site. Because their team was quick on the rotate and viewed your threat on A site much more than it really was, the C defender is already halfway through CT spawn before the defenders realize. At this point, it's too late because your teammates have already entered C for free and are now in the process of planting the bomb and finding advanced positions for the post plant. Using mind games and strategy, your team was just gifted around because you took advantage of the enemy's fear. What's more, now the enemy will think twice before going for a rotate, which could cause them to be indecisive and also add the psychological effect of confusion into every rotation that they make. Simply speaking, now you have more ways to mess with your opponent's head through mind games. Now, if this seems too conceptual and hard to grasp, trust me, I get it. Mind games as a whole is a very complex system that we can only really scratch the surface of in one video. However, there are some general ideas and common practices that can help get us started in understanding how mind games not only affect the game, but also how you can start implementing them into your own play. But before we get into that, we got our question of the day. What are some psychological effects that you notice in games? One thing I've noticed about me is that if I enter a game and see an enemy Reyna smurf, I automatically feel a hit to my confidence of being able to win the match. But what type of interesting interactions do you have to situations? Let me know in the comments below, and maybe we can learn some more about mind games together in the process. So to start off, you need to think about how information affects people's decisions. Although we haven't brought it up yet, information and metagames are also tools that a master of mind games can use to their advantage. If you know how people will react to information, then it's possible for you to counter their play when you give them that information. For example, if you know that their enemy Reyna is aggressive and pushes C long when there's no movement at C, you could very well just wait outside for her to push through, while your teammates are faking an execute or just taking map control on A. In doing so, you net yourself a free kill and potentially stop the Reyna from doing that for the rest of the half, unless you know that she's prideful and will make the same mistake again. Being able to take advantage of enemy tendencies or how they react to information is usually how a mind game begins. Although mind games can be started by either side of the competition, it's often much more beneficial for you to start the mind games because the enemy will usually be on the back foot if you already know how to manipulate their reactions. Being one step ahead is almost always a competitive advantage because it just means that you're more aware of the situation than the enemy is, therefore giving you more clarity in what your win conditions are. However, you have to be careful because maybe the enemy is trying to make you think that you're one step ahead, but in reality, they're reading your every movement. Mind games can hurt you just as much as they can hurt the enemy team, so you gotta be careful when engaging in drawn out mind game. So, how can you consistently and safely engage in mind games? Well, one common practice is called a default. Now, for many of you, this term is very familiar, and for some, this could still be confusing. Most people know what a default is, but few understand the real purpose beyond the information gathering aspect. But for those who don't know what a default is, it's a setup that a team usually adopts for baseline information gathering. So for example, having one player C-Long, 2 players at mid and gardens, and 2 players working A. This setup could vary depending on the team's composition or team playstyle, but the general idea is that spreading the agents apart for a setup enables each player to engage in information gathering around the map, understand the enemy's position, and also their potential plans. A large benefit of defaulting is that the team will have much more information regarding any plays that the enemies make, and also sets up a baseline level of control over the map for the team to operate with. For example, if you have 5 players running A at the start of the round every round, then you won't have information on where the enemies could be pushed up to, such as through C long or gardens or even mid windows, because your team's eyes are all focused on A control. If the enemy finds a flank position, then they can all stack their players onto A because they have information on your position without you necessarily knowing. And when you decide to turn back, the flanker is in a powerful position to catch 1 or 2 of you off guard at the very least. So how do mind games come into play here? A good way to approach this question is to first accept the general rule that mind games are in basically every aspect of the game. Every time information is gathered, or an area of the map is contested, or a confrontation occurs, a small mind game is created. However, unless you're a certified genius of tactics and strategy, some of the smaller mind games are too hard or too complicated to take advantage of. In fact, some of them might even be too hard to notice. This is not the case with defaults, and here's why. Here's a chess analogy for you all. Newer players often don't understand opening moves. They'll think, what the heck is a French defense, or the Sicilian defense, or the Queen's Gambit? Well, they're just different openings that chess players use. That might seem obvious, but the reason why there are set openings instead of a free-for-all random chess match every time is because some players are masters of their specific opening. In the same sense, a default setup for a team is the opening of Valorant and FPS games. By using the same set of utility or similar set of actions, you can consistently put yourself in a position of baseline control that you can work with. But more than that, that's also where your mind games can begin. Now you may be thinking that this just makes you predictable and opens up mind games for your opponent, and to that the answer is yes and no. Running a default does make you predictable, but it also has an extreme upside of you being able to bring structure into your play. Every round of Valorant ends differently and has a variety of different fights, so being able to structure an early round is the first step to creating a consistently successful playstyle. Additionally, the reason why people in chess prefer certain openings is not only because they like the opening, but because they are the most experienced with that opening as well. This opens various opportunities to allow your experience to outplay the enemy or force them to react to your set of moves. If they don't know how to beat your default, then you will naturally be able to take advantage of them and force them onto their back foot every single round. Now, if that isn't already an attractive prospect, then consider this. If you understand your default well enough and add minor variations, such as an intentionally offset smoke or a quote-unquote missed piece of utility, you can actually trick the enemies into reacting and believe that they found a gap in your setup, when in reality, you could be waiting for them to try to one-way your smoke or walk up to you because they think you don't know. By having a default, you control the early game and structure one of the precious few moments that can actually be structured in the game. But that doesn't mean that you have to always do a default. In fact, being too consistent can also be dangerous, as your enemy can eventually find an answer to that playstyle. As such, intentional randomness is a very powerful tool that you can take advantage of once you start to use the default. If the enemy becomes comfortable with your default and knows how to properly play around it, you can potentially surprise them with a set of random plays, such as a rush, a double peek, or any other decision to throw them off their guard. A secret benefit of seeming structured is that randomness becomes extra powerful, but at the same time, you don't want to put yourself in a bad position just for the sake of randomness. Also, you don't want to seem too obvious, like not using abilities on the other side of the map when you decide to change the pace up. Structure needs to be consistent but flexible, so that you can make room for unpredictable plays without sacrificing too much of your structure. So now that we've covered the basics of mind games and the upsides of engaging in mind games and defaults, we have to reiterate the bad news. Mind games are always a double-edged sword. Because the act of reading an opponent is very hard and not something that you can always do, engaging in mind games is also giving your opponent the opportunity to play mind games on you as well. So you have to be aware of the mind games going on when you find yourself afraid of that enemy Smurf Reyna, or when you realize that you're feeling too confused as a rotator. But as I said before, mind games are in almost every aspect of the game, so you can't ever truly distance yourself from them. That's why understanding what is happening and being self-aware is crucial to success in Valorant, and really any competitive game for that matter.
So what do y'all think? Have we helped you in understanding how to become a psychopath, constantly play mind games with your opponents? Well, let me know about it in the comments down below, and also let me know if you enjoyed this new style of content. We're always trying to find new formats of videos to help you all improve. Also, if you liked the video, make sure to leave a thumbs up and also sub to the channel so you never miss out on our uploads. That's it for today, so best of luck on the grind, everybody, and I'll see you next time.